All right, so I'm going to do a little bit of an aside here, and we're going to talk about this idea of how we talk about Yahweh in relationship to the concept of other gods. Let's unpack it. And again, we're playing some word games here, but when I say word games, I don't mean games like fun and games. Mm-hmm. I mean that there's some kind of an artistic play that's going on here in the way we understand language. All right, and so I did my intermediate and my advanced linguistic studies at Harvard with probably one of the greatest living morphologists alive. And so when I'm saying this, I want you to understand this. I'm coming from a place of, I understand the concept of linguistics and how language works and how. So let's talk about this because it's very important. I know people get freaked out, like, I've never thought about it that way before. So we don't want to do that. We want to sit there and go, okay, we recognize that words have spheres of meaning, and we're going to have to talk about this concept of spheres of meaning and how you go about interpreting a word in context. All right, so we asked the question, was Israel monotheist or henotheist? If what we mean by a belief in only one true essence, one true being, one true deity, then they were monotheists. But if people want to talk about the idea that we want to work with, so if I ask the question, do the Hebrews believe in one true divine being? Yes, one. They were monotheists. Did they believe there were more than one God? Yes, they believed there was more than one God, because they define the word God differently than we do. When we say God, we mean divinity. When they say God, they mean part of the spirit world. When they use the word Eloah, or Elohim, they mean part of the spirit world, part of the superhuman world. So let's talk about that. But let's use it in an example. We have this idea of word spheres. So I'm going to pull this in. And we want to talk about this idea. You've all seen a Venn diagram? Mm-hmm. All right, so when we're working with word spheres, we have the concept that a word does not have a single meaning. Words have a variety of meanings. Mm-hmm. And when you change languages and you try and translate a word, frequently you end up borrowing a word that touches your word but does not fully contain it. So I want to work with the word green. Green. So what does the word green mean?
I don't know, but I think it's God's favorite color.
Okay, I think it's God's favorite color, but which means that the word green means is color. A color. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. What else does the word green mean?
Money. Go.
Money. But does it mean money in Canada?
I don't know. I've never seen their money.
Their money is like Monopoly money.
Yeah.
So multiple colors. So their money's not green. They do have some bills that are green, but they have bills that are red, and they have bills that are blue, and whatnot. So green is money in America, not necessarily everywhere else. But why do we call money green? Because all our money is green. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, it makes other countries think, well, how do you tell the difference? They're all the same size? They're all the same color? You mean I actually have to look at the picture of them? I can't just look at the color of them? I can't just look at the shape of them? So much so that when you have some blind people, they will take their money and when they'll someone they trust will say, this is a 10, this is a 20, this is a 5, this is a 1, and they will fold them differently. Mm-hmm. And they'll put them in their wallet so that when they go to buy something at a store, they know that they're handing them the right bill. They don't have to trust the person, the cashier. Oh, what bill is this? They can use cash and still do it because someone they trusted told them what their bills are and they fold them a certain way. Mm-hmm. So when somebody tries to play false with them, they're like, yeah, no. But in other countries, they could do it just by the size of the note, by the shape of the note, not necessarily by the color because they can't see it. Well, what else does green mean?
Go.
Renew.
Nope, that's good. All right, so we got two. So green means go. Why does green mean go?
Red light, green light, yellow light.
Red light, green light, because we have a traffic system that we created, and somebody chose for red to mean stop, green to mean go, and yellow to mean go really, really fast. All right. So you said what?
Renew.
Renew. Renewal. To renew something. Because it deals with the idea of life and produce.
And spring.
And plants. And spring.
And grass, yeah.
And we use the word green. What else?
New at something.
New. To be new at something. So renew, to be a novice. To be new. To be a novice. Inexperienced. So naivete. What else?
Envy.
Envy and jealousy.
Oh,
He's
yes.
green with envy. or jealousy, the green-eyed monster. We do know the difference between jealousy and envy, right? Envy means that you are angry over what someone else has. Jealousy means that you are angry because you feel that something that you have is threatened. So when the religious leaders are jealous of Jesus, they feel that their position of power is being threatened. If you have a relationship with someone and someone else begins to encroach in that relationship. So I was in Alaska. We're going up on this island where there's these two eagles. They call them George and Martha, after George and Martha Washington. While we're there looking at George and Martha, another male eagle flies up to Martha. George goes bananas. These two eagles start fighting over our boat. I'm sitting there trying to get my camera focused on them to try and get a picture. They are in a spinning, tearing, feather throwing.
That had to be so cool.
Oh, it was so cool. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better moment to be there and have two eagles floating 15 feet over your boat.
And they're tangled.
Oh, yeah, they're all
drop.
tearing.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, the other eagle flies away, and George goes back to his Martha.
And she's like, oh, my hero.
So believe it or not, a lot of people will go, because we talk about jealousy as being bad. I don't believe that jealousy is in and of itself bad. So God is a jealous God. It's not bad, necessarily bad. Jealousy can be bad. Unjust jealousy, unreasonable jealousy. But if you're not jealous for your mate's affection, you don't love them. You might have so much trust in them, in their devotion to you, that you don't get worked up over it. But if you truly believe that somebody was attempting to steal your lady or steal your man, and you didn't have a response of jealousy, I would think there's something seriously wrong with your relationship. I'm a jealous man. I'm not walking around punching people in the nose or anything, but I'm very attentive to the relationship that I have with my wife, very attentive to protecting that relationship. That also means protecting my heart, right? Protecting my heart so that other women don't interfere with this relationship. I protect this relationship, protect it in my own heart for myself, and I don't really like the idea of other men being what I consider to be inappropriate. So one of my love languages is touch. It's one of my primary love language. So I don't want strangers touching me because I take touch very seriously. Because I take touch so seriously, I don't want other men touching my wife at all. I don't want you to hug her. I don't want you to give her a kiss on the cheek. I don't want you to rub her back. I don't want you to give her a little tweak on the shoulders. I don't want you to punch her in the side of the arm. I don't want you to make physical contact with her in any way. She's my wife. And I take touch very seriously. That's how you go. That's one of the reasons you guard your heart. Now, maybe some people go, yeah, well, if your wife's love language is works of service, then maybe that's a greater threat. You're right. Maybe it is a greater threat. That someone else comes and begins to serve her in a way that I have failed to serve her. And I should be
more attentive.
I should be attentive to that. I should fear. So, but just a little side on my thoughts on jealousy. Envy is always bad because it's a sign of substantial discontent. You're actually angry that other people get good things. You're angry that other people have things that you don't have.
Envy is another word for covenant.
For covetousness, yes. It's another word for coveting. And we actually have one. There is no commandment, thou shalt not be jealous. Because thou shalt not be covetous. In other words, thou shalt not envy. It means you focus with anger and upsetness over what other people have, and you want it. You want it for yourself. It's the seed of so much evil. What else do we got?
How about just color?
Well, we have got the color. That's the core. The core of the word green is color. Well, we've got all these. How about golf?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The green in golf,
It's like grass. Yeah.
right? It's a specific part of a golf game. Now, isn't the whole golf course green? Well, why do we call this the green? It's a special kind of grass. It's got a special kind of color, special kind of mat to it. It's the green. Now, let's stretch that a little further. Has anyone ever heard of the 19th green?
Yeah, that's the bar.
That's the bar after you're done playing golf. All right, so now we're using green as the 19th green is the bar after you've been playing golf. I don't drink, so I'm not going there, but I would hang out with people and whatnot. But that's the 19th green. That's you're really stretching it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're really out there. So green, and then we have a special kind of green that's used on the golf part, and then we have that extend even to something that's not green in Turkin about bar. What about green as in terms of sick or ill?
Oh yeah.
We'll use the word green to reference a type of
Yeah.
illness or queasiness.
Mm-hmm.
He's green around the gills. He was,
Oh, yeah.
you know, so. All right, all that for the word green. Now, how many of those do you think would overlap with the Hebrew word that we want to translate green?
No.
Renew, maybe.
What?
Renew, maybe.
Probably renew. Yeah, probably plants,
Mm-hmm.
right? The plant life, the new life, right? Probably the sign of new life, the spring, the color definitely, right? If and I say the color definitely, but then that is a question, isn't
Really?
it? Because ancient Near Eastern conceptions of color are often very different than ours.
Really?
Yes. Most of the biblical words that we translate as color words are not color words. They're dye words. They reference a specific type of dye. And those dyes can produce a myriad of different kinds of colors depending on how you treat them. So you can take the murex snail that is used to produce teklit, which is the one that we translate blue, but it is a dye made from a gland inside a certain type of murex snail. By the way, purple is a dye made from a different type of murex snail. It's rarer, harder to find, harder to get, and so the dye is considered more valuable, more expensive. But both of those words produce a wide variety of colors depending on how you treat them. So if you go on some of the beaches, you might find kids from these countries around the Mediterranean diving and finding murex snails, cracking them open, taking the guts of the murex snail, and rubbing the whole snail onto cloth, which then takes the dye that's in that gland and mixes it through the whole pulp of the snail, smear it into the cloth, expose it to the sun, then wash it, and it leaves a light pale green color.
Oh.
But if I take that dye in deep concentration, it creates a deep violet, and the other one takes a deep purple, ranging from black to green. But the word is still the same word for all of them. So we even have to ask our question about the connection of color. But in general, yes, they're using this word. This word.
Wouldn't go too, because
No,
I mean, that would be
not-
universal
no,
lights, right?
No,
No,
go
they
is
don't
not
use-
universal.
Huh.
It's only because of our traffic system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
But other countries don't use this. Like in the ancient Near East, it definitely wouldn't be part of it because they wouldn't even have the idea of a traffic light.
no. I didn't drive there.
Yeah, it's whoever's biggest. Oh, like in India?
They don't have.
You have
traffic
not
signals.
experienced life behind the wheel until you have tried to drive in India.
Do they even have traffic signals?
I hear
Are
They
Africa.
do have traffic signals. Wonderful suggestions.
Yeah, suggested. Yeah, they're
You might want to think about.
Yeah.
Well, golf is universal, so how about golf?
Well, yeah, that would depend. If you went to the other country, what words do they use? Because they're going to translate them, right? Will they use the words? But you recognize that we've got the same problem. Now, the truth of the matter is that this idea of the sick, that does come over. There is a use of the word green in Hebrew that does come toward this idea of unhealth, lack of health, and whatnot. But so you recognize what happens here. We use the word in a variety of ways. So when you're translating any word from one language to another, there are going to be some meanings that overlap. And then what happens if all of a sudden, I'm going to make this one up for the word green. What happens if the Hebrew word for green is used for some special thing that they had? Not money, not a traffic signal. I'm going to make this up. Let's say that there was a policeman who was dressed in green. I'm making it up. But let's suppose in their country, policemen dressed in all green. And so a green beret. Now, we don't just call them a green, we call them a green beret. We're referencing the hat, and the hat represents the uniform, which represents the status. So what if they just called them the greens? Where do we get this from? What's a word that we use? We use the word copper and cop. Cop from some copper, supposedly attached to their buttons, but then I've read articles that are challenging that.
I heard their badges were copper.
Yeah, the buttons on their thing were copper. So I've heard this, and then I've heard some people that are questioning the etymology. Etymology is the history of a word. That there's a
Turns green.
Hmm?
Copper turns green.
Copper does turn green. But let's suppose they were in all green uniforms, and there was a country, and in Hebrew they called them green, the greens. Oh, a green stopped by the house today. Now, it's a possibility because they could have connotations just like we have connotations. So in translation, you can have a word that has some overlapping meaning, has some distinct meaning, but also introduces new concepts that don't exist. So let's take the Hebrew word bitter. The Hebrew word bitter has a lot of connotations to it. We're going to actually do this when we do the book of Hebrews. We're going to do Hebrews chapter 12. There are 5 most misunderstood verses in the chapter 12 of the book of Hebrews. There are 5 of them. One of them is going to deal with this idea of the bitter root. In America, the word bitter often represents a person who is resentful over past maltreatment. That's not what it meant in Hebrew at all.
Taste, too.
Hmm?
Bitter taste.
It also means bitter taste, right? That biting kind of sense. Well, they use the sense of bitter in bite. They use the sense of bitter in hostile, angry, an acidic personality. A person who is just angry. Not necessarily angry because of resentment. English adds the word resentment where the Hebrew word does not have the connotation of resentment. So when all of a sudden we talk about a bitter root, we got whole ministries, getting out the bitter root, because they're forgiveness ministries, and they want to use the word bitter root for finding forgiveness in the world, getting out the bitter root, right? So I actually taught this one time in a church, and it turned out that one of the members of the church had a ministry called getting out the bitter root. And he did not take kindly to me suggesting that the word does not mean resentment. So when we read Hebrews chapter 12 and we see the word bitter root and we take the word bitter and we put the word resentment into it and we interpret this as finding forgiveness for people that have wronged us, we have gone in the completely wrong direction because the English has introduced a word that is not even possible. It's not even possible. But because we chose a certain English word to represent it, it introduced a word that can't be there. Just like you would not use the word green for money, and you would not use the word green for go. You would not use the word green necessarily for jealousy or envy. And you definitely might not use it because they don't even have the word, they don't even have golf in the ancient Near East. So in the same sense, the English word can introduce words that are not possible in the original language. But because we translate it into English, and we pick the word that we think is closest, if it's talking about this acidic quality, then bitter is the perfect word. But then when you say bitter, Americans think resentment. But resentment's not part of the original word. It's not even possible. But I think it's important for us to understand when we're working with words, what we're dealing with. All right, so no word has exactly one meaning. There can be figurative uses, literal uses, technical, general uses for any word. So you have to watch out for nuances when you're working with a word. There may be a core meaning which acts as a center for all the others. So here, the color green is the core center. In Hebrew, it does seem that the word green has the color as the core. But you could also produce that color through other dyes, which have the words teklit and argamum. It's blue, what we call the blue and the purple. In which case we're talking about a dye, not a color. So is the green. Green, their word for green does appear to be a color word. But it's also a word for plants and grass. So there's a core meaning that can be the connection. All right, context is the most important element in discerning which term a word represents. So trunk. So trunks are a pair of shorts. A trunk is a box that you put stuff in. A trunk is the space in the back of your car. Trunk is an elephant's nose. Trunk is the stalk of a tree. Now, you are not going to get confused reading in the English language and somebody drops the word trunk. Are you ever going to get confused by that word? Not likely. No. You're going to know by the context whether I'm talking about an elephant's nose, a box to put stuff in, the back of my car, or the shorts that I'm wearing. You're going to know. Well, the same thing happens in these other languages. Now, there are going to be times where it's not so obvious, but most of the time it's going to be pretty obvious which of the potential meanings of the word. So here we would have the word green and then the term green meaning the golf course, the term green meaning jealousy, the term green meaning plants or spring or go. These become different terms. So we're using a single word, but it has multiple terms or an ideas, concepts or ideas attached to it. We're going to have to read which one we got. Now, connotations are part of a word's sphere. Connotations are aspects of a word's possible use which are not directly connected to a core definition of the word. So to use the word green to mean go is a connotation based on our traffic system. Right? It's a connotation. To use the word green to talk about a part of a golf game is a connotation that is connected to it. All right. So a word's social or biblical context may cause it to be used to speak of things that seem to be disconnected from its core meaning or meanings. All right, so let's suppose you're using a word in the New Testament, and let's take the voice of the Lord that speaks over Jesus at his baptism. What does he say? This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. He's just quoted 3 passages of Scripture. This is my Son, which comes from Psalm 2. This is my beloved Son. That word beloved comes from the book of Genesis, speaking of the call to sacrifice Isaac. Take your son, your beloved son. That's where the word is. That's where it comes from. A single word. So all of a sudden, just one word, beloved, intones a text. And just saying that one word brings that whole text to play. And then the last part comes from the servant songs, in whom I am well pleased. So we're trying right now. We're just trying to get our heads around the way words work, the way we use them, and now we're trying to unpack these words connected to holy, and understanding that they travel, that they move this way, they move that way. All right.
It may be off here, but the word beloved,
Yes.
that would tie into everything about Isaac being the representation of Jesus at
Yep.
that time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just make
That's
sure.
what I mean, the connotations. So to use the single word, now an entire story comes to place, where we have the one who comes to be sacrificed, the sacrificial heir, the heir of promise. Now, where are we focusing on? Are we focusing on his sacrificial death? Because the sacrifice. All of a sudden, we've introduced the idea of substitutionary atonement. Because God calls for Isaac to be offered, but when the time comes, what does he do? He switches out
A ram
the
caught in the
ram.
brambles, yeah.
So in the story, depending on how you're using the story, you're focusing either on the substitutionary atonement of the lamb, or you're focusing on him as the heir. But the word beloved connects specifically not to Isaac in general, but to the call to sacrifice him. So a lot of people look at him as a sacrificial figure. Other people will look at him as a resurrection figure. Because he is, what does Hebrews say? For he, so to speak, received him back from the dead. We're going to talk about that sometime. This is a concept of ordeal, where you are saved from the mouth of death. It's a type of resurrection. You're saved from the mouth of death. So Jonah gets thrown into the sea. He's dead. If you're tossed in the middle of the Mediterranean and the boat goes on without you, you're done. But God delivers him, swallows him by the great fish, and deposits him back on land. That is a type of resurrection. So you have a symbolic resurrection, but then in Christ you're going to have real resurrection. So with Isaac, it's a symbolic resurrection. He is given to death, but he's redeemed out of death, delivered out of death. All right. So again, just by using that word, you're intoning an entire passage. This is what I mean by connotations. The word beloved, what does the word beloved mean? It means precious, dear, right? But what are its connotations if what he's actually doing is quoting the call to sacrifice Isaac in Genesis? All of a sudden, lots of connotations begin to come out of the use of that word. So you got to pay attention to that. All right. So you watch for these kinds of connections with words. So this is actually funny, because when I was first creating this slideshow and this picture came up, my father walked in on me when I was moving through it and saw this picture, and my father went, "Oh my!" Now, my father was born in 1936. He remembers the Nazis. This symbol was terror to him. But you know what this symbol actually means?
Good luck.
Divine blessing. It's good luck,
Divine
good luck, divine blessing. So good luck in a certain type of religious system. But yeah, divine blessing, the favor of the gods. When I first went to India, this was everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Now the Nazis turned it on its side.
Yeah, I was going to say
What do you mean turn it
The
on?
Nazis put
the
it...
arms go different direction.
No.
No?
Same directions, but they turn it like this.
Oh, okay.
They tend to pitch it. But the symbol in and of itself, any symbol, any use of that symbol. So in Israel, they wear it on their T-shirts. I'm not Israel. I'm sorry. Take that back. India. Everywhere. So one of the first things that shocked me when I went into India is how often it's symbol. They paint it on their trucks. They paint it on their buildings. They wear it on their shirts. Their association of it with the Nazis is very weak. Their association with the Hindu concept of divine blessing, much more strong. Much stronger. More immediate for them than the Nazi presence. So when I told everybody that's connected to the symbol of the Nazis, they were like, "What? Really? Is that what you think when you see that symbol?" Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what my father saw. My father actually went, "Oh my. Who was that guy that supposedly got attacked in a bathroom? Famous talk show host, and they carved a swastika in his forehead, but it was backwards,
No.
and so they claimed that he did it in a mirror to himself.
Oh. Whoops.
Now it just could be that the person doesn't know which way it's supposed to go. Yeah, they pitch it like this. But why did the Nazis use it? Because it was a symbol of divine power and divine blessing.
They were really into that.
Yeah, they were into the demonic, into a lot of demonic stuff. All right. So when we're reading the Bible, we have to remember that even though we're reading it in English, when we have to define a word, we have to define Hebrew and Greek words. Now imagine when you're defining Greek words that sometimes you have to define a Greek word that is actually representing a Hebrew word. So I'm looking at an English word that represents a Greek word that represents a Hebrew word. It gets fun, but you have to be careful. This is not like, oh, this is impossible, leave it to the experts. Oh, no, wade in. Everybody, wade in. Learn as much as you can, but wade in. Have some fun with it. But always be tentative until you get to rock bottom. Until you get down to rock bottom. Be willing to let certain things go. An English word can lack certain possible meanings in Hebrew. So let's suppose you want to translate a word out of the Hebrew or a word out of the Greek into English, and you have to choose between two possible words. And if you make a choice, you eliminate a possible meaning. So a Hebrew word can mean two things, but there's no single English word that means both of them. You know what I mean?
Good.
There's no English word that means both of the possible meanings of the Hebrew word. There's an English word for one of the meanings of the Hebrew word and another English word for the other possible meaning of the Hebrew word. And you're not 100% sure in context which of those two Hebrew meanings the Hebrew term makes, but you've got to translate it into English. You're like, I am about to make a choice that will eliminate a possibility. There's two possibilities for this word in context. I'm about to eliminate it. So it's like when we talked about the pronouns, that if a translation puts capital H's on their God pronouns and they get to Isaiah 44:18, they're in big trouble. Because the he has blinded their eyes so they cannot see. They do not know. They do not understand. For he has blinded their eyes so they should not understand. Well, who's the he? If the he is God, which is a possibility in context, then you put a capital on it. But if the he is the idol, the demonic deity that stands behind the idol, as in the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers so they cannot see the glorious light of the gospel, then all of a sudden you need a small h on it. You have to make a choice. Either one you do eliminates a choice. So in English, sometimes you have to be careful. Sometimes the English word we've chosen eliminates a possibility in the original. Sometimes an English word that we choose introduces an impossibility from the Hebrew. So the English word can introduce an impossibility and make it look possible, or it can conceal a possibility and make it look impossible. That's translation work. So we have lots of fun. And this is part of the thing that's going to happen when we start getting to the holy. So by our way of thinking, the word God means both more than and less than the Hebrew words for God. Elohim or El or Eloah. So we come back to our Venn diagrams. You recognize the Venn diagrams means they overlap a little bit, but they don't overlap perfectly. So here we have the English word God. Here we have the Elohim. All right. Hebrew word Elohim means suprahuman. It includes angels. It includes demons. It includes the cherubim and the seraphim. It also includes kings, bigger than your average bear, and judges. This is the weird part of it. It
Why?
includes
They have more power than you,
yes,
so
because
therefore-
they're powerful.
Yes.
They're not your Joe Schmo. They're not Joe Plumber. They're powerful figures. They're superhuman. You just use the word Elohim to talk to them. Just the word Eloah, and Elohim. They just references these. Now, but what do we mean when we say? Now, this includes the divine. Includes the divine. Divine is just one of its possible meanings, one of its shades. But when it speaks of Yahweh, Yahweh Elohim, he's the Elohim of all Elohims. Of all the Elohims in this world, demonic powers. So Paul is going to say that these gods that they worship are demons. That there's demonic forces behind them. The statue is not the demon, but that's not what idols are in the biblical world. Idols in the biblical world are statues that they've made, that they've done incantations over to invite a entity to indwell and to rule and reign through the object. It's an object that's been made a portal into the divine. That's what a god is. Right? Mm-hmm. But their actual ability to do anything through that portal, other than looking on him, seems to be severely limited. So divine is part of it. Yahweh, of all the Elohim in the world, he is Elohim the one. Elohim is the plural. For Eloah, and then the plural is Elohim. Gods. Or God, because you mean the Elohim of all Elohim. And so that, in that sense, to reference God as Elohim, as a plural, it is not the... So let's say this. It's not the plural of the Trinity. It's the plural of majesty. But you believe in the Trinity. Yes, I do believe in the Trinity. I'm a big defender of the Trinity. If you go on my blog, you can read my recent article. It's What in the World is a Triune God? That's the name of the article. What in the world is a triune God? I do believe in the Trinity, very strongly. But I'm a Hebrew scholar. That's not what the word means. The word is not referencing the Trinity. And so they'll say, well, they have the dual in Hebrew. They have the singular, they have the dual, something that's used for two. We talked about that. And then they have more than two. And since they use the word Elohim, and that's the form that means more than two, it's not exactly how it works. The dual tends to be used almost exclusively for things that come in pairs, not just for having two things. Not just because I went and got two cows. You could use the word to mean two cows, but they tend to use it for things that come naturally in pairs. And so using the word Elohim does not mean, well, at least three. No, the word is the plural of majesty. He is the Elohim of all Elohim. The supremacy, the supreme one. Okay? That's just being good with our linguistics here. All right, so but what do we mean when we say God? Divine. You see the problem. Now, Hebrew will use the word Elohim, which we translate God, but the minute we translate it God, we have just eradicated a lot of possibilities. So if someone says, do the Hebrews believe in more than one God? I'll say, the Hebrews believe in many Elohim, but only one true God. Because they believe in angels, and they're Elohim, and they believe in demons, and they're Elohim, and they believe in cherubim and seraphim, and they're Elohim.
Don't we believe in the same thing too?
Yes.
Angels, demons?
Oh, we believe in exactly the same thing. We're just using different words for it. That's my point. Is that we're playing a word game. When I say game, I don't mean fun and games. I mean we're being artistic and twisty in the way that we use language. And of course, why am I taking so much time to go over this? Is because it's connected to 3,000 passages of Scripture to get our heads around this. So now, instead of just using the word holy, let's add to this how many times the word God is used. So we said 3,000 passages of Scripture that are connected to the concept of the holiness of Yahweh. Now, let's add all the ones that use the word El or Eloah or Elohim. Let's add them to our 3,000. What are we running? 4,000 now? That are connected to this conversation we're having? And if you misunderstand it, then you have a misunderstanding, or at least a not great understanding, of 4,000 passages of Scripture. That you're close, but
No cigar.
You get that? All right, because that's really, really, really important to us. When we talk about holy, That's the true way the Hebrews are going to reference the idea of the divine. And when they use the word God and Elohim, they have a lot of different possibilities of what they mean by it. So when we're talking about it, we want to make sure that we understand that the core meaning of the word holy, the very core, the essence of it, is the divine nature of Yahweh. He is separate from us. He exists in his own sphere of existence. Right? True God. Now, so whatever one concludes about the Hebrew idea behind the words we translate God in relationship to gods and goddesses, only Yahweh is regarded as holy. Very important to understand this. Revelation 15:4. Who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy. There. You want monotheism? There it is, right there. You alone are holy. Now you say, well, what about the holy angels? It's a different connotation of the word. Here we're looking at the very core of the word, the very essence of it. He is, in his very essence, holy. This is that holy does not appear under our category of moral attributes of God. It appears under our category of essence attributes of God. All nations will come and worship you, for your righteous acts have been revealed. Isaiah 6:3. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. All right, here we're going to see the glory. We're going to look at the word glory and how it's connected to the concept of holy. It's almost, glory is holiness encountered. It's holiness connected. When the glory of the Lord is revealed, men fall down at his feet, even when you don't see the whole of it. God's going to say to Moses, he's going to say, I want to see you. And he says, no man can see me and live. I'll put you in this crevice in the rock and I'll cover you over and I'll unveil myself and I'll let you see the afterburn. And it says, and he looks up and he saw the hinder parts of God. It's as if he sees God walking away in the distance. He sees the afterburn. God unveils his holiness, and the rocks and the earth and the sky are impacted by it. And then he takes it away and he lets Moses look at the fading effect that he had on the world by revealing his holiness. And Moses' face is going to begin to glow with like being scorched. You ever see somebody that's got a flash burn? And they come out of a sun booth having those little goggles, and they got the little white circles there, and everything else is, Oh. All right. Holiness in Israel seems to carry more severe connotations than among pagans, though issues of fearful humility are always present. So in other words, even among the pagans, you have to have fearful humility. The level of fearful humility you have is very different among the pagans because they don't believe the gods are watching them. If the god's not specifically looking at them, they didn't see what they did. They believe that they can do things in secret. They believe it's as if it's a super cloudy day that maybe nobody was watching. So the idea that an unveiled encounter with God is lethal is of central importance in man's encounters with God in the Bible. It's actually lethal to see God. Exodus 33:20. But he said, you cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live. Psalm 68:1. God shall arise, his enemies will be scattered, and those who hate him shall flee before him. As smoke is driven away, so you shall drive them away. As wax melts before fire, so the wicked shall perish before God. Think of a nuclear blast and watching the people in the wave of it turn to ash. Exodus 19:22. Also, let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. All right, so lest the Lord break out against them. It's like, I'm going to encounter the holy. You're going to go. All right, wow, we just had a great example. We just had the eclipse that came across a good portion of the country, right? And what do you got to do if you're going to look at an eclipse?
You've got to have special glasses. Or
You have to have special glasses. Now, has anyone seen the article that was written that the day of the eclipse and the day after the eclipse, the day of, and the next day, why do my eyes hurt after looking at an eclipse? Is one of the biggest. It skyrocketed in hits
Why do my eyes hurt?
because people were out there looking at it, even though they've been told not to look at it.
Right.
So let the priests who come near the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. Let the priests do what is necessary to get the protective gear spiritually in order to step into my presence, lest they step in unprepared and I break out against them. This is like automatic. Holiness reacts to that which is out of sync with it. It reacts to sinfulness. So now imagine you're in this room here, and in this room we have a fire burning on a hearth, and you're outside, and you have been soaked with gasoline. You're soaked with gasoline. Your hair, it wouldn't stay with mine, but it's a little gasoline still in your ears. It's soaked in your clothes. It's squashing in your shoes. And then you say, I've got to go tend the fire.
Herbider.
If you walk into that room, you literally have a cloud of gasoline fumes around you. You don't have to touch that fire. You just have to have the gases that are emanating off of you touch that fire, and you're going up like a Roman candle. This is the concept of stepping into the presence of the holy. He is holiness. I am sin. I am sinful. I am out of sync with him. I am wholly other than him. I am so other than him, in rebellion to him. To go and to meet him, I need to prepare myself. And part of preparing myself would be, I have to wash off all the gasoline, I have to change all my clothes, I have to scrub out my ears, I have to make sure that there's not a drop of that stuff on me, letting a little gassy gas go, or it's going to be trouble.
That's interesting, because how many scriptures talk about the smell being offensive to God? That's interesting.
But this is what it's like. It's like, I am sin. I am walking into the presence of the holy as sin. I will be consumed. I need the protective gear. I need the right approach. I need to prepare myself. So you're going to end up, we're going to talk about in the third meaning of holiness, which talks about rules of belonging to the holy. You're going to have things like you can't go to a funeral and weep upon your dead mother and then walk into holy space. There's no association in holy space with death. You have death on you, like gasoline on you, and you're going to carry it into a holy space? It's an insult. It's why certain types of people can't walk into the temple. It doesn't mean that God doesn't love them. It's about the concept of the holy. Now we're going to see in the prophets, this is going to become wonderful, is the way the prophets emerge. Is in the prophets, it's going to be that the righteous are transformed by the unveiled holiness of God. And it's going to be wonderful because we're going to see Jesus, right? Jesus is going to walk into a funeral. He's getting ready to go to the temple, but he's on his way, and he swings into Nain, walks up to a funeral, and he touches the dead. Now, according to that, he cannot enter holy space for 24 hours, and he needs to wash himself. But far from contracting uncleanness from touching that which is unclean, and unclean means unfit to engage the holy. Far from becoming unclean,
He made it.
he
clean.
makes it clean by giving it life. This is contagious holiness. This is what the prophets talk about. That when God comes and reveals himself, the righteous, those who have the spiritual protection, those who have the right cover, in other words, those who hide behind Christ, hide in Christ, they are transformed into the ultimate image of God. And the wicked are forever consumed. Consumed forever.
Is this why when they went into the Holy of Holies, the priest had a rope tied around them so they could?
I've heard that story, yeah, that they had a rope tied around his ankle so in case he ever died, because Nadab and Abihu die because they decide to play games with the holy. They go marching into holy space, unfit, unprepared, playing a prank. The suggestion is, based on the context, is that they got drunk and they were being stupid and silly, and God burned them alive for their indecency. And we go, well, that doesn't seem very fair. That's the nature of the holy. It's like walking. You don't walk into open flame with yourself soaked in gasoline. You don't walk before the holy, full of sin, full of contempt, full of rebellion. Now, this is going to happen with Korah and his companions when they challenged Moses, and they're going to march into the presence of the Lord, each bringing their incense offering, and God is going to consume them with fire, open up the earth to swallow them. But Moses is okay because he is right, he is prepared, he is elect, he is chosen, he has been brought near. So we've got this little problem here. Let the priests who come near the Lord consecrate themselves. In other words, prepare themselves to engage the holy with the right kind of spiritual attitudes, the right kind of spiritual actions. And the actions are lessons. The actions are going to be lessons that teach us about what it means to dwell in the presence, or to come into the presence of holy God, lest the Lord break out against them. And Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up the mountain, for you yourself warned us, saying, let the limits be set around the mountain and consecrate it. And the Lord said, go down and come up. Bring Aaron with you. Do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break out against them. It's like, you need to stay over there. Because if you get too close to me right now, in the condition that you're in, I am not responsible for the volatile reaction that you're going to get. This is going to become very important for us as we go forward. So it fashions the central message of biblical ritual. How can sinful people dwell in the presence of a holy God? How can it happen? He's holy. Man cannot see his face and live. So how can we come to dwell with him? Are we forever banished from his presence? Are we forever separated from him? No. He is going to make a path back to himself, to redeem a people that would be redeemed, to be able to be in relationship with him, to dwell in his presence. Because our heaven is a new heaven. I mean, like when we say heaven, I don't have this idea that we're going to die and go float on the clouds with harps and halos and worship God for 1 billion years, put our hands down, shake them out, and then put our hands up for another 1 billion years. So we are going to dwell in his unveiled presence. I don't know what we will be. John says, I do not know what we shall be, but I know that we will be like him, for we will see him as he is. This kinds of transformative. We're going to talk about that because that's going to be a fourth sense of the word holy. So how can a sinful people dwell in the presence of a holy God? Exodus 33:5. For the Lord had said to Moses, say to the people of Israel, you are a stiff-necked people. If for a single moment I should go up among you, I would consume you. And so he doesn't go up among them. As, I don't know if you've ever, how many of you have had children and had to say, you need to go. You need to go now. You need to close your mouth and go. Because you're in grave danger at this exact moment in time. You know, someone gets up in your grill, and you go, you need to back off. You need to step back because you are in very great danger right now. I am not a pacifist, and I know that I have one of the great banes of my existence is to control my temper, to keep myself, you know, my wife has on more than a couple occasions had to physically hang on to me to keep me from getting out of a car.
Oh, geez.
Just she wouldn't let go of me. And I'm like, because I'm trying to get out of the car. She's not going to let me out of the car. You know, and I had a friend who was he was a sergeant in the Marines during Vietnam. He was a unit commander. And their job was to sneak into villages and among the enemy and cut throats. That's what they did. Everything they did was sneak in, cut throats, leave. So he gets out of Vietnam, and I know him. He's a lot older than I am. And we're driving around with him, and he's been through a lot. He's killed a lot of people. And he is highly trained. I jokingly threw a punch at him once. Never been hit so many times in all my life. I mean, all I remember is being struck from head to toe, every inch of my body being struck with foot and fist, and then flying through the air, landing upside down against the side of a bus.
Oh my goodness.
Because I was just joking, but I startled him, and he just reacted. I was like, dude. And so we'd be driving, and some guy would get really like, come on, dude, you want to... And I'm just like, oh, please, no. No, don't get out of the car. Don't get out of the car. His wife would be with him. No, don't get out of the car. Just ignore him. Just ignore him. Let him go. Just forgive it. Just forgive it. And he would just be like, ah! Well, he was terrifying. He really was. He was terrifying. So he's like, you need to back off right now because the very essence of what I am is in conflict with the very essence of what you are. I'm going to redeem you. I'm going to make a path back with you. Well, why can't God just forgive it? Why can't he just let it go? Even human beings would be amiss if we let go dire actions. What are we as human beings if we leave child molesters to molest? Leave murderers to murder, leave thieves to
Well,
thieve,
that makes you
to
complicit.
steal. Makes us complicit.
What's going on
There's
now?
a price to pay.
Mhm.
There's an automatic price to pay.
Yeah.
And if you don't stop it, if you don't check it, it will spread like poison. You cannot bring gasoline into the presence of flame, and you cannot bring sin into the presence of the holy. It's the very nature of it. So you get the idea why people talk about it as moral perfection. But it's not. But you can see how it's connected. You get there, but okay. So every encounter with the divine required humility, worship, deference. You had to approach the holy on its own terms. So whenever God appears in some form in the world, we call it a theophany, a theophany, or a God appearance. There's different types of theophanies. God appears in the world, but he does not appear in his unveiled holiness. Because if he did, you know what else? One thing that happens, one thing I keep meaning to talk about, is in the presence of unveiled holiness, not only would we die, but in eternity it says that when all of humanity is called before God, before the judgment seat of God, that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. That will not save them. Those who have come to God in hatred and rebellion, they talk about it in terms of being in hell, of gnashing of teeth. The gnashing of teeth is hate. So they will burn forever in a perpetual hatred of God. And yet, the very presence of God overwhelms the human will. So some people are like, well, if God's here, why doesn't he just reveal himself? Why don't you just let us see him? Well, in addition to the fact that we'd all die and be ushered into eternity, which is okay, we'd then be in the judgment seat of God, his presence, his unveiled presence, overwhelms the human will. We would not be able to look upon him, stand in his presence, and be able to deny him. And it's almost like, remember I said that God wants it to be real. So if he gives us choice, because it must be real. And if we do not choose it, doesn't mean we earn it, because the Calvinists are all like, well, choice means you earned it. No. But we have to respond well to to the revelation of God. We have to respond well. But if you see him in all his glory, there is no longer an honest, your will is gone. You cannot, you can't stand against it. Your knee will bow, your tongue will confess. But is it real? Is it a full submission? Because in hell, they're weeping and they're gnashing their teeth. That is an act of rage and hatred. That is an act of defiance, an eternal defiance. I don't want you in my life. I don't want any part of you. Can you live your whole life indifferent to him? Live your whole life caring nothing for him? Living your whole life hating him and hating the people that love him? And then you think that you want to spend your eternity in his presence? Oh, he's going to give you your way. You will spend eternity away from his presence. I'm one of these people who believes that the essence of hellfire is the unveiled holiness of God, perpetually reacting to those who hated him in this world.